I personally really hate the hijab. But again, who doesn't in this country, especially? Though our president, Mr. Raisi, had the audacity to go on international television and say that Iranian women wear the hijab of their own accord, which is really a blatant lie, especially when you have
And Den is back. We're adding Den. Hey, Den.
hello. My
Hi.
connection died for a moment.
That's okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's actually, no, why am I apologizing? The government has been limiting the internet connection because people are filming the things that the police are doing, and they're sending them over to international broadcasting channels. The government is trying to stop the spreading of this. They did this in 2019 as well. This is an incident that we call Bloody November, where they shut down the internet nationwide for 24 hours, during which around 1,500 people were murdered by the police.
You mentioned that you hate the hijab, but who doesn't in this country? What do you think of the idea that these women are hating something that's good for them only because it's enforced, but the hijab itself is not a bad thing?
The idea that the hijab itself isn't misogynistic and harmful is, I would even call it a little bit naive to say that, because the root of the hijab, where it came from in the first place, of course, we know that the story was that there were free women and there were slave women, and women would get up and go to relieve themselves on the outskirts of the city, and then these men would see them and assault them and such. And so the verse came down to tell women to throw these garments upon their shoulders, so that they may not, so that these men would know who the free women and the slave women were, so that the free women would not be assaulted. Now, about that, something that I've always found funny was it's interesting how free women should be kept safe, but it's okay if the slave women aren't. it's
Mhm.
kind of it's kind of brutal. But there is emphasis on modesty in the Quran. I don't remember which verse exactly it was, but it's the one where women are told to cover their body except for that which can necessarily be seen. And in our theology classes, we were told that that which can necessarily be seen is the face and the hands from the wrist down. So there is an emphasis on modesty. It has developed into this idea that in order not to get assaulted, a woman should be modest and she must cover herself. It is putting the burden on the woman. And it is saying that, well, if you get assaulted, then it's your own fault because you were not covering up. That is where the harm comes from. And that is where the misogyny is, because even though, I'm not denying this, Allah does tell men to lower their gaze, but is that really enough when, again, most of the responsibility is lifted and placed on the shoulders of the women?
So you think that you would be supportive of the hijab, or what is your stance on the hijab in general, especially given your background in Iran?
Um, my stance, okay, so this is not going to be a lot of people aren't going to like this. I think that people should be free to wear whatever they want. So I strongly oppose the idea of a ban on the hijab, because if you ban something, then people are going to want to go towards that thing, whether it's good or bad. It's almost like human nature, where we just want to keep going towards that thing that is forbidden. So it's also unfair. What is the difference this is something that I would say before the Islamic Revolution, there were instances where the women were forced to take up their hijabs. And after the Islamic Revolution, now they're forcing us to wear the hijabs. I don't really see any difference in this. But I think that even though there must be a choice, a lot of women who say that they wear the hijab by choice may not actually be wearing it by choice, because is it really a choice when you have been conditioned from childhood to want to make that choice? Like, is it really you autonomously doing it, or is it the indoctrination that is giving you the illusion of autonomy? There's also the conversation of feminism, that, well, feminism is about giving women a choice, but I think in the modern world we're seeing that feminism keeps taking on these new forms, and some people are reaching the conclusion that maybe some things that we call feminism aren't actually there's something that Mona Al-Tahawi said about this. She said, I'm not going to allow something that calls itself feminism to come inside and then cut feminism in the knees. Or when they asked her if she should respect the decision of women who choose to wear the niqab, she said, well, if somebody chooses to become a slave, should I then respect their decision?
Well, that depends on what respecting that decision means or what it entails. So, what do you think that means when someone says, do you respect her choice to wear a hijab?
I mean, I certainly do. It is definitely, at the end of the day, we're not going to force anybody to do anything.
Well, so does the respect mean that you won't force her to take it off? Is that what the word respect entails?
I think, yeah. What I'm saying is that at the end of the day, we have no right to force anybody to do anything. But there was just one point that I wanted to make, was we have to understand that just because somebody calls something a choice and sort of puts the name of feminism on it, it is not necessarily feminism. And just because a woman chooses to do something, it does not automatically make that empowering.
You know what that reminds me of? On the other end of the spectrum, those who choose to do displaying their body in certain ways for monetary gain, let's put it that way. There's the narrative that it is very empowering and that it's, you know, feminism, it's part of the feminism movement. Do you see it as similar? Are there any parallels between that and the complete other side of it?
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that, actually. I think that women over sexualizing themselves and women wearing the niqab or the hijab are two opposite extreme ends that are both harmful. I think that uh, we should be able to come to more towards the middle. And that is my stance, really. I think that they're both extreme ends that I don't view them as necessarily good.
Well, I'm going to interject with my male opinion for a second, if you don't mind, just because I don't want to come off as like not wanting to take a position on anything, but at the same time, I don't want to influence the guest's position by giving mine first. Um, I I don't judge people who choose to, you know, who choose to cover up head to toe because they think that otherwise they're going to entice the men and whatnot. I don't judge them in the sense that I think they're ignorant or I think they're like maybe stupid or something like that. And at the same time, I don't judge those who choose to display their body for monetary gain, overly sexualize themselves. I just think that neither should be presented as a good example of agency over your body. Like it is still an expression of your agency over your body in a sense. At least one of them may, on the face of it, seem more of a free choice. But there's a lot of negatives to it and how the person came to those conclusions. And it's irresponsible to just say, yeah, blanket, this is a woman taking control of her body. And that's a good example of feminism. That's the part that don't I don't like about that. But I think that neither should be forced out of whatever they're doing. But it's good to educate people on the middle ground so that they don't end up finding themselves in one or the other, in bad circumstances or not realizing what they're getting into. That's my position on that. Do you think that, like, some people are saying this protest is mostly political and against the regime, not the symbol of the hijab itself? What do you think about that? Is it just political? Is it just the other, or both?
I would say that it's both, especially because the hijab itself is connected to the regime. It is one of, at the end of the day, this is the Islamic regime. This is the Islamic Republic of Iran. Yeah, the very infrastructure of the rules, the laws in this country are based on the Sharia. And to say that the hijab is irrelevant is really incorrect. They are chanting against the Islamic regime. Like, they're not saying the regime should go, they're saying the Islamic regime should go. They say Marg bar Jumhuriya Islami, which means death to the Islamic Republic. Or they say Akhund bayed gom beshe, and Akhund is like an Islamic clergy, like the mullah. And they're saying that the clergy should F off. Again, I don't want to swear. I don't know how much liberty of vocabulary.
Oh, feel free to express yourself. Yeah.
So there's also, we're seeing women burning their headscarves, and they're putting their headscarves on stakes, tying them on stakes, and then setting them aflame. They're burning the pictures of the supreme leader, and you can see that this is like an outburst, because these things have happened so many times. One example being, again, Bloody November, that the people are just have had enough of this sort of government. A lot of Iranians want a secular government.
Okay, so it's a bit of both then. Because I've seen a sentiment among Muslims protesting that these women are burning the hijab, like, don't make this about Islam and the hijab and so on. Do you see that in Iran, or is it just the people outside of Iran who are complaining about burning the hijab?
The number of people in Iran itself who say things like that are very few compared to those who say, listen, this hijab is connected to Islam, and we just don't want this Islamic regime. We don't want anything to do with mandatory hijab, with Islam or anything. We just want a secular government. And I think it's actually so funny that it's always people in Western countries who get to freely do whatever they want that come rush the support of the hijab and Islam so quickly. It is something that baffles me so much, that our sisters abroad, when they see that our people are being massacred and our people are dying on the street, the first thing they do, instead of standing with us and condemning mandatory hijab, what they're doing is rushing to defend the hijab and invalidate our experience by saying, oh, actually, like, this isn't real Islam, or this isn't, not like, this entire thing you're experiencing, it's not real, it's not how it should be. So the thing you're opposing is not the real deal. You're wrong in the very core of what you're fighting for.
Does it help to know that this is not actually real Islam, but some mutated version of it? Like, does that change the situation on the ground?
I don't think so, because the hijab isn't the only thing that's wrong with Islam. And if this is not real Islam, well, nice. We have dozens of other issues that we can look at. Are we going to dismiss all of them as not being real Islam too? What's next? Are we going to look at the Quran, verse 434 or 411, and be like, yeah, no, this isn't real Islam. Fake Quran. Bring in the next one, I guess.
Yeah, it seems very counterproductive to me, and it doesn't do anything. And I think it's real as long as it's happening. So if it's happening to one person or millions, that especially millions, that's a real manifestation of Islam. Whether you think God, who allegedly exists, actually meant this or that, is utterly irrelevant. Like, it's focusing on the reputation of a man or a god, a fictional god, rather than how can we fix this. So I'm sorry that you keep hearing that from people all over. And that brings me to my next question. Well, two questions. What do you hope would happen, and what can we do as people who aren't in Iran to support you and help you achieve what you hope would happen?
My greatest, aside from what I hope would happen, my greatest fear is that our people will be manipulated into a revolution that is not really theirs, that we will have once again, as it has happened for decades, we will have countries outside of ours interfering with our politics and manipulating the sentiments of the people for their own gains. That is my greatest fear. And sometimes I even wonder, especially because of the sensitive political, sort of geographical place that we are in the world. I know it's going to be difficult to be a peaceful country, especially when it comes, because there's resources in our country that would be very useful to Western countries. And I just hope that we'll be able to establish that sort of peaceful government that doesn't involve itself with the neighboring wars, or doesn't start wars or conflicts or threaten people with nuclear bombs and such.
That's it's interesting and telling that when you're asked about what you hope would happen, unfortunately, you have to think about what you hope would not happen, because that's a bigger concern at the moment. But that does answer the question, and yeah, I appreciate you sharing that with us. And to reiterate the other part of what I was asking, the super chat also asked the same question. Thanks, the zone. They say, what can we do to help Iran's women during this time?
Right now, there is protests going on in London, in New York, in Seoul. It was either Sweden or Norway. I don't exactly remember which it was, but there's Iranians in these different countries gathering around and protesting against the regime. There is the hashtag on Twitter, the Masa Amini hashtag, that has hit around over 80 million. It has been used around 80 million times, and it keeps increasing. I think that you guys can maybe take part in the protest or support by doing, using the hashtag on Twitter or something. But honestly, if I'm completely honest with you, I and many of my friends as well, we just don't think that this time it's really going to get anywhere, because our people don't have a leader. There is, of course, the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, who is the son of the late Shah, the late king who was driven out during the revolution. But he doesn't have as much of a following. People are not as accepting of him for him to be an acceptable alternative. So I genuinely don't think that these protests are going to get anywhere unless somebody, a prominent political figure, someone can stand up and lead the people and say, okay, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to, I don't know, take Tehran, go do that, and then our next goal is going to be this, and then we're going to establish the constitution. They're going to do that and that. We don't have that. We only have a mass of people who are angry, but their anger is not managed by anyone. It is not being directed towards anything.
I understand. And I was thinking about that. I hope that someone can rise to the occasion and it's not someone with malicious intent. But that is very concerning that it's all up in the air. And we've seen that in other countries in that region before. And unless it's well managed, like you said, it doesn't really end up in a lot of actual progress. But I sure hope that that happens. And I hope that no matter what incremental progress there is, that there's also an aspect of progress for women all around the world and in Iran, of course, that there's something to be gained out of this, this unnecessary death and many other deaths. And I really hope that the situation changes. We will continue to demonstrate and we'll continue to make a noise about it. And I was happy to see, like, people sometimes dilute the importance of these hashtags and whatnot. Sometimes they don't do much, but this has helped get exposure for this event and what's going on in many parts of the world where they didn't know what's going on. They just see their comments being suddenly spammed by this hashtag, and then they look into it, and I'm so happy to see when someone starts to, spew the same stuff about, you guys don't know what you're talking about. This is not Islam. This is just some Islamophobes or whatever. I'm happy to see that people shut them down very quickly. So I hope that does have some effect.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
Well, I just hope that someday, as ex-Muslims, we won't have to hide who we are from our own families. And I hope that women, especially ex-Muslim and Muslim women, will be able to have the freedom that they really deserve, that we will not have to fear for our lives, living under tyrannical regimes and living as second-class citizens. And my greatest wish is for all of us to have that freedom and that ease of mind, that peace of mind someday.
I couldn't put it better myself, and I won't try. Thank you very much for talking to us today about this, even though it's a bit of a struggle for you to keep trying to connect, but thankfully we did get to talk to you today. I hope the best for you and everyone else in Iran.
Thank you so much.
Do the Muslim women have to wear hijab? How many say yes? No. If I can only say one word. Why? Well, because if she didn't want to wear hijab, it's okay, just stay home.